Welcome to Enneagram Conversations with Renee Siegel. Maybe you know your Enneagram type, but what's next? Renee uses the Enneagram in conjunction with self-awareness practices to help people better understand the patterns of their type, including patterns of thinking, emotions, and behaviors. The show is highly interactive. Listen or call in to find out how to identify your type, and for those who do know their type, what can you do next to open yourself up to a greater capacity for personal transformation? We all have great strengths, sitting alongside areas that we need to strengthen. It starts with noticing your patterns. You'll begin to discern whether you need to step in and take action, or just sit back and observe. Learn how to dance between observation and participation, and watch yourself transform. Enneagram Conversations starts now.
Welcome to Enneagram Conversations. I am so excited today because I have two amazing guests on my show, Sharon Ball and Clifton Harris, to talk to you about their type, Enneagram Type 3, sometimes known as the performer, sometimes known as the achiever, lots of other names, I'm sure, but those are the two we're going to stick with today. I'm sure if you Google the literature, there's probably even more of them coming up every day, different names. And today we're going to have hopefully a really interactive conversation between the two of them. And I'm going to kind of pull back and be a fly on the wall, because as you listen to people speak about their type through their own narrative, it will give you a much different flavor than me just talking about the type. So welcome, Sharon. Welcome, Clifton. I am so excited to have you today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Yes. So if each of you could talk a little bit about yourselves and your experience with the Enneagram, just kind of because we're going to really kind of unpack that, but just kind of a Reader's Digest condensed piece right now.
Well, being the Southern gentleman that I am, ladies first.
Thank you, Clifton. So my journey began with the Enneagram, Renee, I think about 15 years ago, and out of my personal journey. Then it moved into my business, and I have a counseling center, and I'm a consultant. My business name is Nine Paths. And so I brought the Enneagram into my therapy practice and really just thought, wow, this is fantastic how we can use this as a tool. And then about 6-7 years ago, thought, why are we not using this in organizations? And of course, we met through training with Ginger Lapid Bogda, where Clifton got his training from as well, in understanding how to take it into organizations. So that's kind of, it evolved through my personal story into my professional.
Cool.
Yeah. 3 years ago, I've been knowing Sharon for quite some time, but about 3 years ago, I got introduced to Enneagram with Sharon, and we did some work at my church using the Enneagram, and then we did some work, at my office around it, and then I, followed Sharon into more endeavors around the Enneagram, and then I decided, I might as well go and get certified in it, based on some work that she and I are about to launch, this fall. And so, yeah, and I've been using it ever since, as the president and CEO of the Urban League, so now I'm working on all of my staff now to make sure, that they know their type, and it's helping me to understand and know how to deal with them, so it's been a great tool in the toolbox.
Yeah. I want to add to that in terms of a kind of a similarity with all of our journeys here. I'm a therapist, and when I found out about the Enneagram, I thought this is such a cool tool to deliver to my clients and patients. And then all of a sudden, it was more than that thing that I learned that was this cool tool. It was like, it's like this panoramic experience opens up, and you go, Oh my goodness. This isn't just a cool tool to teach my clients or my patients. It's a tool that's not going to be nearly as useful if I don't understand it myself. I couldn't get enough of it, started to get educated and gather information. And then, like both of you, my staff, I realized if my staff knew their type and could lean on each other for both the skills that that type had, the organization would run differently. So could you talk a bit about that? Because it sounds like we all have that in common.
Well, you know, it's interesting because Clifton, you and I have worked on projects before in the past. We've always had a synergy between the two of us. And I think as we've understood our type, we are type threes, we can see how well that interlocks together. And so you can only imagine, you know, if we have this, it's just natural, a natural flow between the two of us. If we can find that with our staff, I mean, our organizations will run more efficiently. And I'm saying words that probably everybody's like, "Ooh, that sounds like a three." But that's the way I think. Wouldn't you say, Clifton?
I would agree with that 100%. You know, that is kind of the way you think. You know.
It's funny because when I think of it from a different type, I didn't bring it in for that reason, but I get it. I just wanted peace and harmony, and I wanted them to be interdependent on one another. But even when we talk about through the lens of our type, you can hear through your own narrative what was really important to you, right?
Yeah. You know, and I got two of my staff members are eights, and they are a bit of a challenge, you know, to say the least, you know. So, but now that they understand that, you know, they're finding a way to do the two-step with each other.
Mm. Yeah. And so what was it personally? Let's move a little bit out of the professional piece because I know we're going to kind of come around to that again later. But if we can begin to take a gander at what happens personally, you know, for a three when you are examining what's running the show, you know, what's happening behind the scenes. What was that experience like?
Well, for me, I got to understand everything, you know, about what's going on, right? You know, so that I'll know how to begin. So I'll use the organization that I'm with. You know, when I came into the Urban League about 4 years ago, it was very important for me to understand all of the inner workings of what was going on with the organization so that I would know how to proceed in making the corrections that needed to be made, because obviously there were some corrections that needed to be made or I wouldn't have been brought in, right? And having served two mayors in my career and an artist, you know, I had gotten to the point, you know, where I was pretty much, you know, not only a performer, but a very high achiever. And so it took me about 2.5 years to really figure out, you know, what was going on. And then when I went to work on those things, my staff had a very difficult time keeping up with me because I was constantly producing and performing and expecting, you know, high results and performances. And it took them a minute, you know, to catch on, you know, to the fact that I really did have the organization's best interest in heart. And I wasn't really trying to just do it, you know, to build or pad my resume, you know, but I was really trying to get them to a perfect place and make the organization the North Star, you know, that the board wanted it, you know, to be. So, I mean, I just dove right in and didn't look up until I realized, you know, that I had accomplished these things, and someone had to tell me, okay, you can slow down now.
So while you were gathering that information in the first couple of years, were you still running at that speed?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
I chuckle because you would never know that he was running at that speed as far as internally, because I don't know that my speed is that fast until somebody else slows me down. So I chuckle because that is it. I continue to produce and produce, and the temperature gauge and learning how to, I don't know, Clifton, how would you say it? Like, monitor the room and make sure your train hasn't left the station and everybody's on
Right.
the platform still, but then also challenging and wanting to keep that end goal in mind, because I think we can work quite efficiently and productively. And something else I heard in there was, he took inventory of everything because he had this end project, this end goal in mind of what the organization, was going to be about. And I feel that too. Like, if somebody puts me on a project, I'm looking at the end, and then I'll do thorough investigation to make sure we get it there, or I won't do it at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
I go all the way to the end and work backwards.
Mm-hmm. So in some ways that looks like a 1. Can you help our viewers understand and listeners understand how that's not a 1? That's not, because it's definitely not a 1.
Yeah, so we're looking for like the best result, not the right way to do. Like, we're looking at the end being the best. So
Right.
if we were talking about 9 paths or Urban Link, like, we want it to be stellar. And how we go about it is, there's many choices in going about it, but we're always looking at what's going to make it the best versus what's, I hate to say, not right, necessarily right, because we do right by our businesses, but I think there's just a different motivation. I'm not driven by perfectionism in that regard. It's more what's going to make it the best project or stellar. I don't know. Would you say that, Clifton?
Yeah, what's going to make it, like I said, the word that I use, what's going to make it the North Star? What's going to make it, the go-to, process, for us. Yeah, I wasn't trying to control anything. I wasn't trying, to seek the perfection in it. I was simply, trying to find, what is the best products, and how do we get those best products, to our constituency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's easy when we don't look at the underlying core motivation for why somebody does what they do to confuse those things. You say, I'm looking for the North Star, something that is going to be exceptional, something that is going to, be the best. It's really easy to hear that I'm going to find the best way to do that, or the correct way to do that, or and so I think those fine nuances that people get to experience about type are so incredibly important. It makes it so much different than any other personality typing tool, because you could certainly misconstrue a lot of that and just make assumptions if you don't ask somebody, why are you doing this? So we're almost ready to go to our first break, and I'm just excited to dive into the next piece. After our break, I am Renee Siegel, and I welcome you to Enneagram Conversations, where we are going to resume our conversation with Sharon and Clifton when we return. Thank you so much, viewers and listeners. We'll be right back. Enneagram Conversations, where in this segment, we are going to really dive into the type. And my guests, Sharon and Clifton, are going to talk about how they found their type first. I mean, landing on your type is sometimes really easy, and sometimes it's not quite so easy. So I would love for you to share just a little bit about your journey to finding your type and what that was like, and was it easy? And for those people, if it was easy, for those people who are not finding it so easy to land on an Enneagram type, what you might say to them.
Well, for me, like I said earlier, it came through a personal journey of what was going on in my life, and really having experienced probably a significant trauma at that point in time. It kind of shut my world down, and I wasn't used to going a slow speed. And I think I've heard threes say this a lot. This definitely happened for me, that there was something significant in their life shut them down so they can hear what the difference between the noise and what they were trying to say or do. And I think when I was going at such a fast speed, I could not recognize who I was inside because I was doing so much out here. And when you think of the type 3, for me, it's about connection, affirmation, recognition, knowing that like you and I are okay. But it's through my achievements, or it's through what I'm doing. Am I a good mom? Am I the best mom? Am I the best this or that? And so I think when all of that gets stripped away, I think that's when I woke up and was like, wow, there's something with this that means I can't do slow. So why can't I do slow? I had to ask some really tough questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it came a little easier for me because I had Sharon is such a great guide, you know. She and I had the chance to work together, and we were working on a project that involved taking a 77,000 square foot hospital and turning it into a residential treatment facility for homeless families. And all that was going on at the time, I was able to reflect on some things in such a way that Sharon was able to help me process, because she was the therapist there, you know. And we used to have these long talks, and you know, I had no idea, you know, that she was psychoanalyzing me the whole time, you know, we were talking and stuff, you know, but come to find out, you know, that she was.
Being a good friend, Clifton.
and kind of as a result, you know, I was able to determine in that experience that every career, every job that I had, you know, was taking nothing and creating something, or taking something that was in trouble and getting it back on the right path. And and when that got stripped away from me, it caused me to reflect and to think, well, yeah, there really is something to this. Even when I play golf now, I can't play golf at a slow pace. Drives me crazy and stuff. You know, I have to go forth and conquer that hole and keep it moving and stuff, you know, and find the best shot. And so it was just something within me that helped me rule out all the other types, you know, to say, this is who I am right here. I'm a true 3, you know, and I think those that know anything about Enneagram and who know me will tell you that I am a true 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a funny little story about Enneagram workshops in general that have been conducted worldwide. You know, the lowest number to show up, or the lowest amount of people to show up in any particular number, are generally type 3s. And it's because they're too busy. And until something happens, like you've both described, things being stripped away, or many times it's a physical or mental health challenge, where you're not defining yourself by what you do, but by who you are, or sitting with no distraction about what you do and just sitting with who you are, that you show up. And so when we get type 3s, I know in the Arizona Enneagram Association, when we get type 3s, it's just like, they're here. So
because they take that.
They're in the building.
They're in the building.
Oh, that's so true though, because, you know, slowing yourself down allows you to really sit with who you are. But if you've built yourself around all that you've done, and again, go back to that motivation. I'm not poo-pooing on the motivation. I'm not saying it's just how we survive. We learn to survive this way. It's how we learn to have connection. It's when, you know, a parent praised us or a teacher gave us accolades, then we were seen. And so, you know, it works until it doesn't work, right? And then you get into adulthood and the drive to be seen or the drive to be recognized has to be dealt with sooner or later.
Mhm.
And when I slow down, I go to a very spiritual place, and I'm seeking that affirmation and all through scripture.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Certainly not an affirmation for what you've done.
no.
Yeah. And that's the really important nugget that I would hope everybody listening would walk away with, that we are loved for who we are, not for what we give, not for what we look like, not for what we do, but we are loved for who we are. And that's the essential quality that is so important to get to. So Sharon, did you think you were a 3 from the get-go?
No, at the beginning, I had friends tell me I was a 7 or a 9. And I can understand why, because when I was going through my difficult season in life, my line from my 3 to the 9 avoided conflict at all costs. And then I could also see why they mistyped me as a 7, because I still was doing everything and I was so optimistic. Like the glass is half full all the time. When I really began to unpack it was I had such a strong level of denial of my feelings. And I had maybe two range of emotions there, which is everything's great and everything's greater. Like, this is just good. Don't take me to sadness, because if I went to sadness, I was terrified I'd go to despair and I wouldn't be able to do all that I was doing. So I think another telltale sign for me as a 3 was recognizing internally, what was I feeling, and can I acknowledge that? And when I got real with myself, very honest with myself, I began to say, no, I can't. Well, then why not? And that's very different than a 9 and a 7 perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep, it is. And so what would each of you tell our listeners and viewers that are having a hard time finding their type?
I think I would tell them to be patient and to take it all in, because at the end of the day, you really will find out, who you are and where you fall, But I think, if you try and force it, I'm a this, well, that's me, and you can convince yourself of anything, but
Enough.
if you slow down and long enough, to just kind of take it all in. I have this saying, God has a way of getting you where he needs you to be, and so, he got me to where I needed to be, and accepting the fact now that I am a true 3, and when I understood that about myself, I knew how to know to relate to people better.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything specific, Clifton, about taking it all in that you might ask people to consider? What does that mean to you?
Well, what it meant to me was not letting other people define who I am and what I was doing, right? And not letting the descriptions of the Enneagram types, suck me into being something that I'm not, right? And I just had to sit with it, for a moment, and rest in the fact, that is not me. I am not a 9, even though I hate conflict, that I am not a 9, right? And even though, I love to be busy, I'm really not a 7 either, right? And I definitely don't like the control stuff, so that is not me. That is not me, who I am on my wings and stuff, so yeah, I would just be patient,
Mm-hmm.
You'll
So
get
I was just going to say, so part of taking it all in is kind of listening to the aspects of other types and saying that's not something I can really relate to, even though I can relate to an aspect of it. That's really not at the core of who I am. That's really not what's running the show here. Yeah. Yeah. Sharon, would you add anything to that?
Well, I was just thinking, Clifton said, he said several times, be patient. And for threes, patience is very difficult. That's something we have to learn to master. So, but yet it's very rewarding because that's when we can go into our places of solitude, our faith, the very sacred spaces, right? Because then the busyness is gone. So I was thinking that's important for all types to be patient and let it simmer in. And you can do that through reading, trying on each type. And what Clifton's getting at is give it time to find the motivation of why you do what you do. Your end result might be the same, but how you get there is going to look different than some of the other types. And if you slow yourself down, you might see that repetition of pattern or that repetitive pattern of that motivation. And if you're not slowed down and still and patient, you won't hear the patterns being repeated.
Mm-hmm. So take it all in, be patient, slow down. Those are the things that I'm hearing you say. Well, thank you so much. We are just about to end the second segment of our show. I am Renee Siegel, your host, and so pleased to have these two lovely guests on, Sharon and Clifton. We'll move into the third part and dive a little bit deeper. If anybody is interested in my work, you can find me at yourpurepotential.com. That is the letter U, the letter R, purepotential.com. The Enneagram is the hub of my practice, and I love the Enneagram. Thank you for joining Enneagram Conversations. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Enneagram Conversations. We are now going to dive even a little bit deeper, and we're going to take a look at, in terms of living in three land or being three, identifying as the type three, what characteristics do you absolutely embrace about yourself? We have this Enneagram piece that has these assets of our type, gifts of our type, strengths of our type, and then we have the challenges and liabilities and the things that are less becoming, our shadow side, things we don't particularly love, but we know that we need to embrace them all. So within the context of looking at embracing all of it, I really invite you to take a look at what you love about your type that may not be becoming, may not be the thing that you would check off the box and say, yes, this is who I am. Because I think part of what I know about growing in our type is that we claim all of it. We hold all of it. So go for it.
So something that we don't want to claim, but is part of who we are.
Something that you have learned to enjoy about your type, the easy stuff and then the not so easy stuff.
Okay.
Maybe that's a better way to say it.
Yeah, no, that's good. Clifton, when you were talking earlier, it reminded me, you said the phrase when you had worked with a couple of the mayors in Nashville and how you were so driven and concerned about what they needed and everybody around you. And it just, that's like, I can understand that language. And that is something for me that when I began to recognize it's not as important what's going on around me and who sees me or who approves of me, but to go internal. Do I approve of myself? Am I where I want to be? I feel like that opened a flood of feelings and that are really rich for threes. Threes can feel very deeply, and they do have a broad range of emotions. And I think that, so there's two sides to that coin. When I'm not looking at other people and I'm solely focused on what I need to be doing, I actually can give my heart out more freely.
Yeah, one of the things, for me is I'll take public speaking as an example. I hate the thought of public speaking, but when it's time to speak, I love it. I enjoy it. I get all into it and stuff, and I don't know when to shut up, right? But then you know, one of the things that I like about myself, like about being a three, is that I'm somewhat of an introvert, and most people don't even know that, right? Because I do have such a public persona, right? And my public persona is about achieving accomplishments and making sure that there's a level of productivity. But my safe place and all is in, my own quiet little silent world where, I'm happy not being around people.
What's interesting, Renee and Clifton, I've spoken to both of you about how the pandemic for me was like a relief. It took away all the things that I had to do, and I actually got to retreat, and I felt very much like an introvert. I'm not saying all threes are introverts, but I resonate with that because there's so much out here that we're doing that it's so nice when you find that space to just go within.
Mhm.
I was living my best life now during the pandemic.
I know.
Still getting a lot of stuff done too, right? Probably getting more stuff done
I
because
got
we're not
way
distracted.
more stuff done during the pandemic.
Yeah. So let's turn the dial just a bit and talk about emotions, because threes are part of the heart triad and they're part of an emotional triad. And they're, in my opinion, probably one of the most sensitive types on the Enneagram without it seeming that they're a sensitive type. I mean, we look at other types and we know they're somewhat sensitive. We can see the sensitivity oftentimes in the phobic reaction of the 6. We can see the sensitivity oftentimes in the 5. We certainly see the sensitivity in the 4. But threes, it's like I remember learning about threes and going, well, there's a type that's focused on other people's feelings. There's a type that's focused on their own feelings. And then there's the 3 that really doesn't like to focus on any feelings. And this isn't just bad feelings. This is like feelings at all. So unpack that for everyone, because, there's a lot to that.
Well, your feelings get in the way of your productivity if you don't keep it in check. And so I think I learned early on as a little girl, if I wanted to be the best athlete, if I wanted to be the best debater, then you can't usher in and access that because it's not going to get me where I want to be. And again, those are things as children we have to rewire as adults. I'm not saying that was a good thing. It was very helpful for me growing up, and then it took me further and further away from myself. So I think feelings just get in the way of getting stuff done, and at the pace that we like to get it done. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. About a year ago, we had death in the family, and my kids and all said, "You know what, Dad? We've never seen you cry." And I thought, that's because I'm too busy, trying to get stuff done. you know. So I agree with that, Sharon, and feelings, just kind of for me, it gets in the way of making things happen. And so I check them. I deal with them in a different way. I remember when my grandfather died, it was a year later on my birthday and all that I really felt the emotion and all of him passing and stuff. It took that long and all for that emotion to come up and stuff. So yeah, it's a pretty sensitive area for me, Renee. I don't do feelings well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say in that same respect, Renee, like what if we do feelings, people in my close circle, like Clifton mentioned his friends and his wife, like my close circle know to give me time to process. I don't process in real time my feelings. There's very much a delayed response to it. Now, granted, over the years of learning about it, it's not like as long as it used to be, but I still need that time for, think of the water on the dirt of a tree that's not been watered, and it's got to slowly sink in for me to just breathe it all in and go, okay, this is going to be okay.
And it doesn't mean that I don't care,
Exactly.
I'm not all in. It does not mean that at all.
Mhm. I think that's the piece that that really gets misconstrued, is that threes are without feelings, and that is just not the case. First of all, no human beings without feelings, right? We all have feelings. That's part of just being a human being. But understanding what happens with them and what's done with them, and you're describing that really, really well.
I mean, I see someone suffering. It's I'm going to correct it. If I have the power to correct it, I'm going to jump right in and correct it. I don't want to see anybody suffer or hurt.
Mhm.
Yes, and that's key to understand. The way in which we go to remedy, suffering is going to be through a solution. We're going to find a solution. So then it delays our own feelings around the suffering because we're headlong into finding the solution.
Mhm. So fixing the problem is far more the priority than allowing the integration of anything that you're personally experiencing around it.
Yeah, because when we had the great flood, in Nashville, for me, it was about fixing the problems. A lot of people were hurting, and I felt really bad, for a lot of people. But my job, required me to find the solutions, and that's what I did. And as a result of that, I got all these awards and accolades and what have you and stuff, which is not what I was seeking. I was just trying to get the job done,
Right.
to alleviate all the pain, right? And so, yeah,
Well, living in Nashville in 2020 and 2021, you've sure had a few things to fix in terms of natural disasters.
true.
Good. Yes.
Very true.
More than your fair share, Yeah. Anything that you would add about wanting somebody to know something about your type that they might not see, might not notice?
I think a relatively healthy 3 is approachable, but can sometimes appear standoffish because they're in their work mode. And I think sometimes that can be misunderstood, that we're not caring, or we can't slow down. But I think 3s who've done their work can still appear as if they're in a fast pace, and will be receptive to somebody saying, hey, can we check in here? Can you, and I would be receptive to hearing that and slowing myself down so I could connect with another person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for me, I would say I really do want people to check in with me, right? Because I want to make sure that I haven't gone off and left them, you know. And so, I find myself doing a lot of the checking in, but I'm really looking for people to check in with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And oftentimes it's easy to overlook the fact that 3s are a part of that connectivity triad because of lots of what we've been describing. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're just about ready to move into our final segment. And before we do, I thank you, listeners and viewers. You are in for a real special treat in the last segment, because Sharon and Clifton are going to talk about what they're up to, which is really, really important, an important part of what's necessary in our world today. I am Renee Siegel. Thank you so much for joining Enneagram Conversations. As we move to break, please return and join us. You won't want to miss what's coming up next. Thank you so much. Welcome back to Enneagram Conversations. In our last segment, we've saved some really, really important information. both Sharon and Clifton are working on a project together. And I'm going to turn it over to the two of you to tell our listeners and viewers what you're up to.
Yeah.
Well, I want to reiterate, as we're kind of this being the closing section of it, Renee, that it has been so much fun. Every project I work on with Clifton, the energy between the two of us, the word is flow. And so this particular project, I mean, we had a blast, and sometimes not so much of a blast with the homeless shelter and some other little projects here and there between. But this one, we're super, super excited. It's called Equity in Action. You can find it equityinaction.com. And we're launching it first here in Nashville. So Clifton, would you give us a little bit of what that looks like?
Yeah, so back when we had the murder of George Floyd, there were many corporations that, scrambled, to get, on their website, their diversity and inclusion statement. But then when you looked at, the inner workings of these organizations, there still was this big disparity, as it relate, to the representation in C-suite positions and when it comes to pay grades and things of that nature. And so Equity in Action is about leveling the playing field and giving corporations a true DE&I lens, that deals with the equity of a commitment to deal with the implicit and explicit biases of cultural and racial environment that exists now within each corporation's DNA, and creates a safe place in which senior level executives can be advocates and not mentors of what we call proteges, rising stars, so that those rising stars can get to the C-suite positions and impact the quality of life for families, and increase the wealth and close the wealth gap that exists between the races and stuff. And so Equity in Action is a program designed to give people a safe place in which to make that happen.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Yes. How are you doing that?
So this is what I love about the two of us coming together, Renee, is this is part of our story. Clifton and I, from 10 years ago, Clifton, just me understanding the racism that existed or still exists in the South, because I'm from Phoenix, and it looks completely different on the West Coast than it does here in the South. And through us working together, we really had to come to a place where we could have very candid conversations around race, racism, and unconscious biases. And Clifton became a safe place for me to begin to process what's going on from a white perspective. And I hope so in reverse for him, with me unpacking some of this, the dynamics, the racial dynamics, gave us a camaraderie around this has to be done together. Topics of this when it's Black and white, they have to be spoken about together, facilitated together, so people can see how to do it. And we've done lots of hard work around conversations in order to be able to help these conversations come alive in our program by modeling it, modeling the tough stuff.
Yeah. Sharon and I've had some very in-depth conversations where I've had to say to her, no, that's a very white that you're looking for. You know that, right? And vice versa. But at the end of the day, it is about having enough trust in each other where we were able, to have very candid conversations, and as a result of that it impacted the work that we were doing and allowed other people, to benefit, for the best diversity and inclusive thinking, that we were able to bring to the table between the two of us, and then draw other people into that and hold them accountable as well. And so that's what this does. It is about, the rising stars being mentors to the executives, because the executives see things through a very different lens, and they don't need the executives to be mentors. They got that part. They know what to do. They need advocates, someone that will allow them to have a seat at the table. So when I go into corporate America now, many of the meetings I go into, I'm the only person of color in the room. And so now I'm old enough and wise enough and confident enough and all that I just tell them, okay, whether you give me a seat at the table or not, I'm bringing my own chair. I'm going to have a seat. So yeah, and at the end of the day, this is about have for the corporations retaining quality workers, getting the diversity of thought in their company, which has an impact on their products and their revenue, and then it has an impact on how the community sees that corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how they see the corporation actually, not just talking the talk. And that's what was frustrating, prior to George Floyd, and even in this last year, as things have kind of slowed down some, we're really pushing organizations to walk the walk. If you're going to say it, then you better walk it out. And this is one way that you can commit to these top talent, that you see them, they're ready. Let's just advocate for positions that they deserve.
And,
in the midst of that, have conversation. Yes.
Yeah, and the data points to the fact that when there's true diversity and inclusion and equity within a corporation, the corporation benefits tremendously, right? And so since they've been tracking Fortune 500 companies, there's only been 19 African-American CEOs, and all of those CEOs have taken those corporations to the next level, which is phenomenal. And that's less than a 2% representation across, Fortune 500 corporations and stuff. So, when you say to me, well, we can't find qualified minority people and all, then it says to me, you're not committed, to even finding them. So.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. I was just going to say, a lot of people don't know what they don't know.
That's correct.
So as we close,
that's okay.
Yeah. So as we close, because we've just got about a minute left here, how can we get that information out? What can our listeners and viewers do to aid this process that you guys are involved in?
Well, get involved. Go to equityiinaction.com and check out the program and sign up for Sharon and I to do exploratory conversations and all with you. Or go to the Urban League website at ulmt.org to find out more about the Equity in Action program. And you can go to NonPass website to find out more about the Equity in Action program.
Yeah.
And Renee, another really fun, I know we're running out of time, but another really cool component is we do integrate the Enneagram throughout the journey. So everybody involved learns their type, they learn how to communicate, give feedback, constructive criticism, be really seen for who they are. And we love that component about the program.
Yeah. Well, this has been an amazing journey for me, and I really thank you both for bringing yourselves full-bodied into this conversation and letting our viewers and listeners hear through the lens of your type your own narrative. I'm so grateful that you were part of the podcast today, and I thank you all for joining. My name is Renee Siegel. Thank you for joining Enneagram Conversations. Our next episode in 2 weeks, we will move on to the type 4. If you have any interest in the work that I am doing personally, you can find it at yourpurepotential.com. That's the letter U, the letter R, purepotential.com. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for listening to Enneagram Conversations. Renee is on a mission to guide people towards cultivating inner observation, which assists with self-awareness and expansion. Identify your type, notice your patterns, and learn how to unlock the higher aspects of your Enneagram type. There is limitless potential inside you already, just waiting to be unveiled. Join Renee next time on this journey of self-discovery and create more purpose and power in your life. For more information about Renee and her work, visit youarepurepotential.com. That's the letter U, the letter R, purepotential.com. Until next time, remember, you are pure potential.